Okay, I think this will be the most pertinent political video you ever see, and I think it needs to be said. And I'd like to start, I'll waffle for a moment as people come on because this is live. I'd like to start with something pretty important. I've been studying electoral law for a long time, and I've been trying to hold the Barsas to account to restore free and informed vote in its true sense and to restore our rights through a Bill of Rights and things like that over the last 20 years. And it was interesting, about a decade ago, I was reading some constitutional cases to get a handle on how the Constitution works and how it protects us. And I found that there was a case, I think it was called Sue versus Hill. Heather Hill was a One Nation candidate, and she was sacked after being elected for being in breach of Section 44 of the Constitution. Now, Section 44, for those who don't understand the Constitution, is to make sure that your candidates that run in elections don't have a conflict of interest. In other words, an interest with another country, or they work for a business that's got contracts with the government, or they work in education and things like that. So it was put in place to make sure that the candidates that are elected are doing the will of you, the people. And as we know, it's been a long time since we've seen politicians doing our will. Anyway, the constitutional case was very interesting to me, and I remember back then saying, well, hang on, if this applies to Heather Hill. Now, when they convicted Heather of the offence of being in breach of Section 44, they wanted to go after everything, fraud, money back, and in fact said that she was so illegally doing this that she was should be charged for failing to declare her conflict of interest when she filled out a nomination form to run for Parliament. And I sat back, and by now I had 10, 12 years of political experience, and I realised that nearly all of the candidates that run and most of the members of Parliament were in breach of Section 44. And it goes somewhere from here, but I'm going to waffle for a moment. So I had a lot of interest in thinking that, well, if they can apply that law to a minor party player, they should apply that law to all of them. One law for all. I've always believed that's the case, justice for all, that sort of thing. So anyway, what happened is just before the 2016 election, I put quite a lot of these members on notice that they shouldn't be running in the elections. They have no right to sit in Parliament. And nothing was done. The 2016 election was run, and during the process, I considered over half of the candidates, if not more, had no right to be candidates. A lot of those candidates were Greens at the time. They were running simply to not win a seat, but just to preference Labor Party. The Labor Party know damn well what the law is, so would the Liberal Party. They have lawyers. They know what it means to nominate. Now, let's go to the process. So let's say I want to nominate. Now, I've done this 5 or 6 times in 20 years, so I think I know the process fairly well. You go into the Electoral Commission, you have a certain amount of signatures. These big players don't need that. Their political parties are already registered, and they go in and they sign a form, and it says, are you in breach of Section 44? If you don't understand it, please read up on it. If you are, it's a criminal act, and you can be charged under the Crimes Act and go to jail for lying on your nomination form. So in 2016, after the election, I realised that there were a heap of people that had run and had an impact on the election that shouldn't have, and I knew there was a heap of people elected. And I put the AEC on notice. Anyway, that dug in for the first time, and just after 2016 election, 2 of the Greens candidates actually did the right thing. They retired. They resigned from Parliament because they had been in breach of Section 44. And I then said, well, hang on, there's about 50 that should be sacked. Why only the Greens standing up? What's happening to the rest? And as you know, a little bit historic here, I managed to get a few others to admit it. And then Barnaby Joyce gave me hell on Twitter, so I gave him hell about being in breach of Section 44, and it went on. And I'd like to tell you what the outcome is that you're not seeing and you're not hearing, the legal outcome and implications of these people sitting in Parliament. Now, let's just start from scratch. You go in and you want to nominate for Parliament, you fill in a form and you tick a box, and then you allow to run. the AEC don't check whether you are in breach. They consider that you wouldn't have lied, and you signed a contract, and therefore you go ahead. Once you're caught in breach of Section 44, you actually committed a crime. So about 26 members of Parliament last year, as you know, were in breach of Section 44 and had to the High Court. They didn't even resign. The High Court had to force them to resign. That's about 26. I know that figure to be more than double that. So there's a lot of people that go into Parliament and shouldn't have sat there. And when we remember this goes back into history. So this is just what's happened recently in 2017 and 18, but there are hundreds and hundreds of members of Parliament that never had a right to sit in Parliament. Now, this is going somewhere, so please listen and please share this. So what then happened is all of those people, none of them were charged. Now, what's meant to happen is this. You're in breach of Section 44. The High Court declares that you lied and cheated to get into a position of power. You're then sacked from government. You are then meant to be charged for committing a crime, okay? And you cannot keep the rewards of a crime. None of us can, nor can they. So they are meant to repay their parliamentary wages and any pension or anything else they're entitled to. And also, if you look at the Constitution as a whole and you go to a section called 64 and have a read, the last part of Section 64, it states that you cannot make decisions in Parliament unless you are a valid member of Parliament, okay? It's not particularly in those words, but the interpretation of the Constitution is that you cannot sit in Parliament and make decisions for the people of this country unless you're validly elected, okay? So you've got people that were sacked for cheating that should have been charged with a crime. Now, if you're charged with a crime and it's an indictable crime, which it is, that means that you cannot resit for Parliament, okay? You cannot resit. As we all know, all 26 of those people, well, most of them, were then either replaced by their political parties and or somebody else, and most of them re-ran. Now, you can't re-run for politics if you're under charges, okay? So those ones that re-ran, they should have been charged. Parliament have decided, without telling any of us, that they can tell the federal police not to charge these people with a crime. They cannot do that. They're not above the law. They're subject to the law. The Constitution states that. So these people were criminals, and what's worse is they've been re-elected into Parliament, and they now can retire on a lifelong pension, even though they never had a right to sit in Parliament. They had no right to be re-elected to Parliament. They never had to pay back their money, and they never had a right to make any decisions for the people of this country. All right. I hope you've got me so far. Now, if I am correct, and I know I am, if 60 or 70% of Parliament for the last 30 years have been invalidly elected, okay, that means that any decision they made on our behalf is invalid. They cannot vote in Parliament without being a valid elected member of Parliament. And they're not, okay? They breached Section 44. What they also, as you could understand, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ex-members on lifetime pensions that shouldn't be receiving a pension because they never had a right to sit in the first place. They also made decisions for the last 30 or 40 years on where this country goes, and they had no right to make those decisions. So we have a massive constitutional mess here that the government's trying to sweep under a rug. Now, if you haven't noticed, around 60 members of Parliament or more are resigning before this next election, and I'll give you the 3 reasons why. Firstly, some of them should never have sat, so if they get out now, they can take their pensions. Secondly, the new pension rules will come into play for them, so if they stay in Parliament any longer, they'll get about half the pension they'll receive if they quit now. So they're not doing it for family reasons, they're doing it strictly for financial reasons. And thirdly, those that are subject to breaches of Section 44, generally it's because they hold a passport for another country, that citizenship of another country. And the reason they hold those passports and those citizenships is because when they get their massive pension for life, if they receive that in a foreign nation, they have tax benefits, okay? So all of this is corrupt. They've known they're doing it for a long time, but the problem for all of us is this. They're all jumping ship because they know they're in trouble. Nothing's happening about it. And I know there's lots of people online saying it's because of this particular person or that particular person running different court cases. It's not. It's a straightforward constitutional mess. Okay, look, there's lots of other things with the Constitution we can argue, and I'm doing that. I'm in the High Court soon, and I've been in the Court of Dispute of Returns on several occasions trying to re-empower the rights of all Australians. And as you know, every time I get really good at it or get better and better, I get arrested and put in jail and all sorts of things, and I've never been charged with a legitimate offence in my life. The fact that they laid charges means I can't run, or if I'm in the middle of an election looking like winning, if they press charges when I'm released from jail under some bogus made-up crap that they've had to drop on the day, then usually the news crews are there to make me look stupid. So all I'm saying to you is this. Over half the parliament for over 30 years or more, it could go back much further than that, never had a right to sit in parliament. They never had a right to make a decision for you or your country. They never had a right to draw a wage, and they never had a right to take their pensions. And not one of them has been charged with a criminal offence, which it should be. And you and I all know, when you're watching this video, that if either of us or any of us lied to deceive to get money, that we would be held to account and that money would be taken off us and we'd be charged with a crime. And that same laws should arise to people, particularly those that dare call themselves honourable in this country. So our country is in a constitutional crisis. The only way out of this is to, 1, sack the government, 2, go to a new process. All of those people in the new process should be vetted to make sure that they're in compliance of Section 44 and every other section of the Constitution. And all of those people, you should go to a new election with a new election process, because the electoral law in this country has been sabotaged by the two-party system to empower themselves and take the power which is rightfully ours as the people of this country away. Those changes to that legislation are bogus and invalid. We need to go back to the grassroots of this country, re-elect people based on having a genuine, free and informed vote, and bring some change to this country and invalidate some of the shit legislation they've passed over the years and get this country back on track. You can't sweep it under the counter. You can't just retire, you 60 or 70 people that are going to retire and take a pension for life, knowing damn well you've got no bloody right to it. And we, the people, need to stand up here. If the Parliament is ordering the federal police not to prosecute criminals when it's themselves, we have a big conflict of interest problem here. And the judiciary could step in, because obviously there's a separation of powers, but they won't either, because your political parties actually choose most of your High Court judges and so forth. So we have a completely broken system, and the only way of fixing it is people power. Look, there's not much we can do at this stage. We can all have a vote of no confidence, where I call it put the bastards lasted, PBL, put the bastards last, and put in your votes this year and put the major parties last on the lower house ballot and leave them off the Senate ballot and get rid of them altogether. And then, of course, we'll face a bit of chaos, and I think chaos can sometimes, in circumstances like this, be good. And then we can try and get back on track with people in there that will restore our constitutional values and our protections, and get this country back on track. But right now we're in a constitutional crisis. These people know it. They think they can run away, quit politics now, take a lifetime pension and run away, and that's not good enough. I think they should all be held to account, every single one of them. Iceland could do it, we can do it. It's a people's movement now. It's time for us to stand up and drag these people out and say you're crooks, put them in jail, and get back onto getting this country into line with genuine representatives of the people that deserve and encouraged to work hard to earn the title of honourable, not steal the title of honourable by corrupt practices. Thank you for listening.